So the next section we're going to talk about is healthy relationships and interpersonal violence. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have already done the Title IX training course, this will sound pretty familiar, and if you haven't, when you go to do it, a lot of it is going to look familiar from what we talk about in this section. So if you don't know what Title IX is already, I'm just going to read it word for word so you know what it is and have a better understanding of it. So the Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 is a federal gender law that prohibits discrimination based on sex in education programs and activities that receive federal funding. Sexual harassment, which includes sexual violence and other forms of non-consensual sexual misconduct, is a form of sex discrimination. So everything we talk about in this section does fall under Title IX, so that is something that you should know. So it's a very umbrella piece of legislation, and a lot falls under it, as we will talk about here. So just to start off with some statistics to set the scene of what is going on within the U.S. and at Clemson today, just so we have a better understanding of what's really going on. So within the U.S., so nationally, on average, at least 50% of college student sexual assaults are associated with alcohol use. Women and girls are the vast majority of victims. Nearly 1 in 5 have been raped in their lifetime. Men and boys are also at risk. Nearly 1 in 71 have been raped in their lifetime. The vast majority, nearly 98% of perpetrators are male, even when the victim is a male. And we know that 11% of men commit campus rape. So obviously we are not taking the stance that every man on Clemson's campus is a rapist, but that is clearly just the data we have from within the U.S., so that's not necessarily at Clemson, but that is what is going on in the country today. So bringing it back to at Clemson, approximately 20% of first-year women at this university experience some type of sexual victimization. Alcohol was involved 2 out of 3 times, and 92% of victims knew their offender. So it's a really common misconception that people have that if any sort of rape or sexual assault or anything like that takes place, it's done by a person who is completely random. You've never seen them before. They just kind of come out of nowhere. And while that definitely can happen, and that's really scary, that's usually not what takes place on college campuses, especially Clemson. So it might be someone who you have a class with, who you've seen before, and obviously that's not to scare you, that's just to make you aware of what's going on, so you're not just believing what you see on TV or in the news or anything like that. So on a little bit of a happier note, we're going to go over just some qualities of a good and healthy relationship that we all should strive to have. So I'm sure we can all think of those, but the qualities we want in a relationship include trust and support, honesty and accountability, responsible parenting, shared responsibility, economic partnership, negotiation and fairness, and non-threatening behavior, and also respect. So the kind of centerpiece of that relationship is equality, with nonviolence kind of as the surrounding theme in that relationship. So on the flip side of that, there are also obviously unhealthy or abusive relationships that we all need to be aware of and look out for. So the qualities that kind of come with those relationships can be shown in this chart right here. So that includes using isolation, minimizing or denying blame, using children, using gender privilege, using economic abuse, using coercion and threats, and using intimidation. So that kind of has power and control as the center theme, with violence all around, whether that be physical, sexual, emotional, verbal, anything like that. So that is what we do not want in a relationship. These are just some signs of an abusive relationship just to be aware of, and if you're looking over these, you may be thinking like, oh my gosh, my friend and their significant other do this all the time. Maybe it's time to have a talk with them. Maybe that's not the most constructive relationship for them to be in. Also, if you're looking at these, and especially the checking cell phones one, that one, if you're looking at that and you're like, oh, that's kind of normal nowadays, that while it definitely can be considered normal, some of these behaviors can start manifesting on themselves and turn into abusive behaviors. So you definitely kind of want to get rid of those at the start and not let them turn into anything worse. So Clemson's anti-harassment and non-discrimination policy includes sexual assault and or battery, sexual coercion, sexual misconduct, dating and relationship violence, and stalking. So stalking is usually used, I feel like nowadays, to refer to someone who is kind of creepy, following you, maybe like hiding in the bushes late at night and kind of popping out and scaring you. And definitely that is stalking. That's really scary. But especially nowadays, stalking can include a lot more than that, especially in terms of social media and cell phones and stuff like that. So stalking can obviously be following a person or showing up places when or where you're unwanted, but it can also be stuff like sending and receiving a ton of content over social media or anything like that. So it's basically a pattern of behaviors that makes a person reasonably fearful. So it's really important to know what stalking is and know what it looks like in case it is ever happening to you or a friend. Hopefully never, but just knowing what it is and knowing how to get help or stop it or anything like that. So the CDC states that sexual violence refers to any sexual act where consent is not obtained or freely given. Sexual violence is any sexual act that is perpetrated against someone's will. Sexual violence encompasses a range of offenses, including rape, unwanted touching, and threatened sexual violence, exhibitionism, and verbal sexual harassment. All of these involve victims who do not consent or who are unable to consent. So consent is the next thing we're going to go over. We have a video explaining consent in very simple terms, so just watch this and then I will talk about it.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, "Yes, please. That's kind of you." And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, "Do you want tea?" because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, "But you wanted tea last week." Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, "But you wanted tea last night." If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
Okay, so consent is obviously pretty easy to understand when it's making someone a cup of tea or asking to borrow a pen or something like that. But when alcohol and drugs and sex and all that stuff gets involved, people get super weird, but consent does remain the same. Consent is a clear, concise, and sober yes. It's nothing else. That's all it is. It is a clear, concise, and sober yes. So consent requires a few things. It requires speech or conduct indicating a freely given, uncoerced agreement to engage in sexual contact. It cannot be inferred from silence or passivity alone. A current or previous relationship is also not sufficient to constitute consent. It cannot be legally given if one or both parties are too intoxicated to know what they're doing. Body language is not considered consent, and consent can be withdrawn at any time by either person. So consent is a clear, concise, and sober yes. So I'm now going to go over some resources in case you or someone you know is ever sexually assaulted and needs some help. So the biggest thing you want to do is if someone ever comes to you and tells you that they believe they were sexually assaulted, anything like that, the biggest thing to do is to for sure believe them. They're obviously in a very fragile situation, so you just want to make sure that you say, I'm here for you, whatever you need, whatever you want to do, I'll be of help to you. So you can also offer to them some different resources. So obviously the police department is a great resource. They can help you out with anything legal, anything like that. CU Cares is a program that is run through CAPS. It is a group setting type therapy for victims of dating and relationship and sexual violence. So that, as I said, is run through CAPS. That is a great program for someone to get involved in. CAPS is obviously a great resource. You can even offer to walk someone over to CAPS if they should need it, if they want to talk to someone or anything like that. A care report is a great resource as well. You can go on, you can file a care report for them, and someone from the correct office will reach out to them. The Title IX office, as I said earlier, everything in this section falls under Title IX. So obviously the Title IX office is a great resource to use if you do want to pursue anything legal, if you want to find out more about your rights, anything like that. So the SANE nurses are a resource that we have at local hospitals, not at Redfern, because Redfern is not open 24 hours. However, there are SANE nurses at local hospitals. And what SANE nurses do is they perform rape kits. So a rape kit is a test where DNA evidence is collected from the victim, and it can be saved for a very long period of time. So even if in that moment someone is saying that they don't want to pursue anything legal, they don't care about DNA, I would definitely bring up to them getting a rape kit, just because those can be saved for a very long time, but they can only be done up to 72 hours after the event takes place, so it has to be done pretty soon after. And in order for evidence to be collected correctly, one cannot eat, shower, drink anything, or brush their teeth. So if someone does want to get a rape kit, it needs to be within 72 hours, and they cannot do any of those things. Also, those can't be done at Redfern, as I've said, but any local hospital will do that for you. I would also definitely encourage medical attention just to make sure this person is safe and healthy. Maybe go through some STI testing, pregnancy testing, anything like that. Medical attention is definitely necessary in this situation. There are also some other off-campus resources such as Foothills Alliance and Safe Harbor, as well as Pickens County Advocacy Center. Those are all local rape crisis centers. They're free. They will help you out, give you any sort of resources or help you need. There are also some national resources. So there is the National Domestic Violence Hotline, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, and also the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So obviously these are all to be found on our website, but the biggest thing to remember is that these resources are there, they do exist. So if, God forbid, someone you know is ever sexually assaulted and they come up to you asking for help, you know that there are resources available, there are places they can go, and you're not just saying, I don't know how to help you out. So these resources are there, they're in place for a reason. So just remember them if you ever need them.